Good morning, welcome to Board Game Barrister, our local game shop in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It is Tuesday once again, and every Tuesday we get to play a game. Today that game was Whirling Witchcraft, a game where we have got a workbench of ingredients and we're trying to brew potions that we get more ingredients out of so we can send them to our neighbor and try to overwhelm them and overflow their workbench. We'll talk about how to play it in just a second here. I'm here with my fellow barristers Glenn, Elizabeth, and Gordon, and before we get into everything we liked about the game and what made it so cool, we're going to talk about how to play. Welcome to Whirling Witchcraft, a game where we're going to be trying to brew as many potions as possible to create a bunch of magical ingredients that we're then going to send to our opponents to try to overwhelm them by overflowing their workbenches. The first thing we're going to do every turn in this game is to add a new recipe to our repertoire. To do that, we're going to look at the 4 recipes in our hand and choose one of them that we'd like to play, and then place it face down. Once everybody's done this, we'll flip them face up, and then we'll have a phase where we're able to actually start brewing the potions on those recipes. So the basic format of a recipe is that there will be inputs on top and outputs on the bottom. That means that if I put the ingredients on the top into this recipe, I then get outputs of the ingredients on the bottom. So in the case of my warty brew, if I added that 1 frog necessary to brew the potion, then I get to go to the general supply and take the outputs and add them onto that card. Eventually we're going to have a bunch of recipes in front of us and can brew as many of them as we want to, but with the one I've got in front of me this turn, that's going to be the end of my brewing phase. So I'll end that phase by taking all of the outputs I created this turn and adding them into my cauldron. The inputs are expended, so they go back to the supply, and now comes the interesting part. I am going to pass my cauldron with those outputs to the player on my right, and the player on my left is going to pass me theirs. The ingredients that all the players get passed have to immediately get added to their workbench, so great new ingredients, right? Well, this is where the game gets interesting. These are now ingredients I can use, so if I can find recipes that use the spiders and the mushrooms, that's amazing for me, but if I can't and my opponent continues to send me more and more of those, that's how my workbench is going to get overwhelmed. Anytime I can't add ingredients to the end of the workbench because there are too many of them, those go back to the player who sent them to me as points. As we continue to add more recipes, we're going to be able to start to create some chain reactions with them. So if my next recipe played was this one, the poisonous sorcery, you can see here that the mandrake is an input for this one. So my brewing phase could look like this. I'll pay my 1 toad for my warty brew as I did last turn, and that means I'm going to get the mushroom and the mandrake as outputs once again, but now I can look at the rest of my potions and see if I'd like to use these outputs as inputs on those. So I could pay that mandrake, and that's going to get me 2 more mushrooms and another mandrake out of the poisonous sorcery, which is starting to pressure my opponent a lot on the mushrooms. And the last thing we haven't talked about is these little symbols at the top of the recipe cards. Every time we play a new recipe, we're going to check for any of these arcana symbols at the top of it, and each player will have their own little arcana tracker on the side here. And looking at the recipe card I just played, this one has a cauldron and a book on it, so I'm going to put my cauldron on the one spot and my book on the one spot. Anytime we ever get one of these tokens to an even number, the 2, the 4, and the 6, we immediately get a one-time use ability. The cauldron is going to let us add an extra cube from the general supply onto the cauldron to pressure our opponents a little bit more. The book lets us use tokens from the general supply as if they were on our workbench in one type. So I could say, oh, I want to use frogs from the general supply this turn instead of using frogs off of my workbench. And the raven can get you out of a real scrap. Every time you hit an even number with the raven, you get to remove any 2 ingredients from your board immediately, so if you're about to get overwhelmed in one of the ingredients, that's a great way to get out of it. We'll keep playing, brewing, and passing until one player has accrued 5 points from overwhelming their opponent on the right. As soon as somebody hits 5 points, the game ends and they win. Alright, so the first really cool thing to know about this game is that no matter how many people you're playing with, it's going to take you a half hour to play. This was our first time ever sitting down to this game, and it took us a half hour. It was really cool. And because you're interacting with only the person on your left and the person on your right, it's going to be about the same experience whether you have 3, 4, or 5 players. Now, notably, it goes down to 2 players, and we think that would be a really cool experience where you're directly passing things to that person, getting the cards from them, and then trying to overwhelm them with the stuff that they're sending you. It would be awesome. We haven't gotten to try it yet, but Gordon and I are very interested. So that's going to happen. Yeah. But yeah, the actual like half-hour timestamp on the game, no matter what, is amazing.
Oh my God! Look at all that! Ah!
Yeah. What the fuck am I trying to do?
Nice. Oops. That's an input. Thank you. Ooh. Why with the mandrake still? Right.
Oh my God! So many ingredients.
1 more off the mandrake.
Andy just got 4 points off it.
What? Oh.
Despite the fact that it destroyed me, I like the fact that a lot of my fate is in my own hands. because it's what I'm passing you. Now there is the luck of the draw of the cards. I was getting cards and I'm like, well, I can't burn through all of these, so Andy's going to get something that's going to make me unhappy later on, but it's still the fact that I'm deciding what you get to a degree. And I like games like that where it's this, I have some control of my own destiny, not all of it, but I have some of it. And if I lose, it is at least partially my fault because I gave you the tools to win.
Yeah. Yeah, if there had been a scenario, because I did overwhelm you with spiders and frogs in the end, where you were able to find a card that used both spiders and frogs and helped you kind of get rid of some of that, and then were able to also pass me stuff that didn't create more, that could have extended the game and made it totally different.
Yeah.
Well, and that is kind of what happened, where I was overwhelming you with Mandrake, and then you found a way to use that Mandrake to Glenn's sorrow.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you hadn't found that way to use that Mandrake, I would have overwhelmed you with Mandrake.
Yeah, it was already happening. You were still managing to, just at a slower pace.
Yeah.
I really appreciate being able to look at my left neighbor and my right neighbor to figure out what sorts of ingredients I'm going to have to deal with and what ingredients can I use to my advantage. I enjoy being able to look at my neighbors and respond to them in that particular way, but I also really enjoy that there is an element of luck because in an engine building game, I do feel a little bit bad if I'm not as skilled as the other players. So having that element of luck, the luck of the draw, I feel like there's a good balance between my choice on how I build my recipes, and if somebody got a more powerful card, they got a more powerful card.
It's a pretty few and far between game like this one that feels like you have such an immediate and fluid reactivity to the actions of the people around the table. And in this case, it's the person on your left who is pressuring you with different tokens, but also feeding you different tokens, and the player on your right who you're trying to overwhelm with the outputs of what you do with those. So we had really interesting situations. Like immediately in our game, Gordon came up with a way to start giving me Hearts of Shadow, which you can't hold much of, so that's a really strong stressor, and if I hadn't found a way to start using that, then that's really bad for me. I did find a card that could use it, but then Gordon stopped feeding them to me as a reaction to that. He found a different way to use it himself, and instead stopped feeding it to me, so that card sat there for the rest of the game and was useless.
Use the mushrooms and the spiders to make a Mandrake. I'm going to use that Mandrake and a toad from the workbench to make a Heart of Shadow, and that Heart of Shadow is going into my cauldron.
Thank you. We will produce great things to destroy Glenn with the Heart of Shadow you've passed us. Thank you for not looking before brewing.
No, I didn't pay any attention to that.
The Storm Incantation works every time.
Yeah, I really liked how the currency is the ammunition. The ammunition is the currency.
Yeah.
If Glenn gives me currency, I turn it into ammunition to throw at Gordon. But then if I stop giving the ammunition, then you don't have any to pick up.
Yeah, right.
It's great.
Yeah, it was. I really want to play it again. It was really good. That feeling of, again, reactivity, but reacting in that input to output, or ammunition to resource.
Yeah,
super fun. There's one other thing that I think needs to be mentioned, and that is the cauldrons are adorable. They're also really useful and functional. Because you're not, we're so often passing cubes around, and having them in that defined area that you are now passing helps the arrangement of the bits. So it ends up being super important to the function of the game, and they're super cute.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been a much longer game if Andy had to pass me the individual thousands of cubes he's handing every turn.
All right, I think that about does it for Whirling Witchcraft. We had a really good time with this one. We hope you had a fun time watching, and the game looks fun to you as well. As always, if you want to leave a comment, we love getting back to those. Hit that subscribe button and visit us on the online store, or if you're in the Milwaukee area, in one of our brick and mortar stores. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. Thanks for watching.